Hi, I'm Jody Caden, Director of Funding Services for Indigenous Services Canada, BC Region.
Hi, my name is Wendy Ham and I'm the Executive Director of AFOA BC.
We started the grant in 2019, right when the new Fiscal Relationship Grant became available to First Nations, and we commissioned AFOA BC to do the NFR grant forum that first year. We've been doing it every year ever since. It's a great opportunity for the funding services officers that serve the First Nations in this province to meet with them in person, to hear about their priorities and needs. And it's a wonderful opportunity for us to get feedback from First Nations about what is working and what is not working with the NFR grant.
In 2019, Indigenous Services Canada came to us and asked us to put together a grant so that they could get feedback on how the new 10-year grant was working. It was a great opportunity because it was near and dear to my heart, as the community I used to work for as the finance director had just entered into the grant as well. And this gave us the opportunity to get feedback and a lot of good information about how the grant was working for communities.
Hi, I'm Davey Coyle, Director of the new Fiscal Relationship Grant with Indigenous Services Canada. I really love attending the grant forum. It's an invaluable opportunity to provide the latest information about the grant, listen to interactions between current grant communities and those considering the grant. But it's also an opportunity to answer questions and, most importantly for us, to listen to ways we can enhance the grant and make it even better to further improve this new fiscal relationship between First Nations and Canada.
This was an especially fun event because it was the first time we were able to bring together those who have been in the grant for 5 years and those who are just new to the grant in 2025, which were tribal councils and Indigenous organizations. They were able to interact and talk to each other and learn what are those components that were working and which ones weren't. We started off our day in a good way with Squamish Elder Bob Baker doing a traditional welcome. And then we moved into presentations by key stakeholders.
Today we're going to be talking about the 10-year grant. Now I know that Davey's going to
such as Indigenous Services Canada BC Region Funding Manager Vern Bob.
I'm not sure anyone's actually answered the question yet, what is the NFR grant?
As well as the NFR Director Davey Coyle.
Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about eligibility for the NFR 10-year grant.
We also had a presentation by the First Nation Financial Management Board.
So it is really important to have your voice heard.
And we also had a special guest in the evaluation team from Indigenous Services Canada who was doing a 5-year NFR grant evaluation. For the afternoon sessions, funding services officers were divided up by their region. And then we divided the delegates into their regions as well. There were 5 questions posed to each group, and they were given 15 minutes to discuss each question. Once that was completed, we had the FSOs present the results to the group. This was then summarized into a final report. The NFR Grant Workshop was set up this way because we found that having smaller groups allowed for a more interactive discussion. We wanted to facilitate interaction between the delegates and the funding services officers.
We set up the grant this way because we found it was the best way to work with First Nations to hear what's working and what's not.
The new Fiscal Relationship Grant seeks to advance predictability, flexibility, and sufficiency for interested First Nations. Better predictability in terms of funding levels and making sure the funding's available when communities need it. Better flexibility to allocate funding to community priorities. And of course, sufficiency through a predictable escalator based on inflation and population growth. We're always looking for ways to improve the new fiscal relationship, including the grant. And that's the exciting part of advancing a new fiscal relationship in partnership with First Nations.
The final report and summary are available online at www.afoabc.org.
Some of the barriers to that is the remoteness of the community. Hard to get people to come out. And then the challenges surrounding housing. If you provide housing to these new staff, that might be housing that could go to members. So could be some discontent there. So that was the recruitment. There's also the retention. So keeping staff for a long period of time.
So I would say the biggest, most outstanding point was communication. And that's all the way from is to the First Nation and throughout the First Nation, like, are we in a grant? Some recipients didn't know, not all the staff members knew. We could do a better job of explaining what flexibilities are involved, what you can utilize as a part of the grant. And a lot of this has to do with not only us providing this information, but sometimes due to turnover, some of that information is lost. Sometimes staff are located in different areas and that information doesn't flow to everyone. One of the challenges of being in the grant that you still face is funding sufficiency. So the grant wasn't necessarily meant to address funding sufficiency.
Okay, it's about own source revenue. Chief and Council have been around a long time, so they've seen things in the past. And the question is, if we're efficient, we invest our surplus, we have economic development, is that ever going to be used to bring down our core funding?
No. I'll give you more than that.
So I want you to know that in BC, we're implementing all of this relationship first. So if you have questions, you talk to your FSO, get to the manager, you can get to me, we can have meetings with your community. If it doesn't feel relationship first to you, I want to know about it.
The whole point of the grant is to get Canada out of your way, right? You are self-determining, and the simple little mechanism is going a long way to empower you to make decisions around your planning, around your investments, and where you're going to make the greatest difference. So thank you for leveraging that. Thank you for sharing your input and how we can make it even better and how we can expand the new fiscal relationship beyond the grant. And just one little plug for patience and a bit of understanding. We have a third of the First Nations in Canada. We do not have a third of the FSOs.
This was a great opportunity for communities to come together and network, learn, and get feedback from one another.
And it's a fun way for FSOs to work with the First Nations that they serve.
As of 2024-25, there are 160 First Nations across the country with the new fiscal relationship grant in their funding agreement, receiving collectively over $1.6 billion a year. A number that continues to grow as more communities choose the grant and as escalator is added, and we're really excited in terms of the direction that we're heading. If you have any more questions, reach out to us at nfr@isc.gc.ca.
For further information on the NFR Grant Workshop, contact Jody Caden, Director of Funding Services at Indigenous Services Canada BC Region. And if you want AFOA BC to do a project for you, reach out to us at www.afoabc.org.